Before the soaring tales of heroism and legend, there was a very real and brutal ambush in the Pyrenees mountains. A desperate and brutal fight for survival. A chaotic scramble far removed from any romanticized tale of chivalry and honor. It was a clash born of desperation. The truth, as is so often the case with historical events, is far more complex and nuanced than the grand, sweeping narratives found in epic poems and ballads. It's a story deeply rooted in political miscalculation, a campaign gone awry, and the harsh realities of medieval warfare. A desperate retreat from hostile territory, culminating in a devastating surprise attack launched from the shadows of the Pyrenees. The famous battle, immortalized in verse, wasn't a grand clash of civilizations or a holy war, but a brutal massacre of Charlemagne's rearguard, ambushed and overwhelmed by local warriors defending their homeland. Roland, the legendary hero of the song, far from being a mythic figure of unparalleled strength and virtue, was in reality a Frankish commander who met his end amidst the chaos and confusion of a rout, not in a blaze of glory. The Song of Roland, a powerful piece of literature written centuries after the event, took the raw materials of this historical disaster and transformed it into a timeless legend, imbuing it with themes of courage, faith, and sacrifice. To truly understand what really transpired on that fateful day in the Pyrenees, we must peel back the layers of myth and legend and examine the cold, hard facts as revealed by historical accounts. The ambush at Roncevaux Pass, dictated by the unforgiving terrain, was a tactical nightmare waiting to happen, not a glorious last stand against overwhelming odds, as the legend would have us believe. The victims were, in reality, exhausted and demoralized soldiers, burdened by the fatigue of a long and arduous campaign, not shining examples of crusading knights, driven by religious fervor. The real story, stripped of its romantic veneer, is a human story, about ordinary men, the unforgiving mountains that shaped their destiny, and the grim consequences of a campaign that ultimately ended in failure and disaster. So, let's embark on a journey to uncover the truth that lies buried beneath the layers of legend and myth. The year was 778 AD, a time of shifting alliances and burgeoning empires. Charlemagne, the ambitious king of the Franks, set his sights southward and marched his formidable army into Spain, a land of diverse cultures and competing powers. This was not a crusade fueled by religious zeal, but a calculated move for political gain, a strategic play on the European chessboard. He answered a call, a desperate plea in fact, from rebellious Muslim leaders within the Iberian Peninsula. Charlemagne was hoping to expand his sphere of influence, to extend the reach of his kingdom, and, crucially, to secure his vulnerable borders from potential threats. The core of the plan was simple: take Zaragoza, a major city in the region. But the city's ruler, a shrewd and defiant leader, refused to surrender to Charlemagne's forces. The siege dragged on, and Charlemagne's meticulously planned campaign stalled, mired in the face of unexpected resistance. Then came unwelcome news. A messenger arrived bearing tidings of a Saxon revolt back in his own territories. This forced a hasty retreat, transforming what was intended as a triumphant victory into a frustrating and potentially dangerous withdrawal. As the Frankish army began its long march back north, Charlemagne, in a move that would prove to be a costly error, ordered the walls of Pamplona destroyed. His aim was to prevent any future rebellion or resistance from the city. This act, however, enraged the local Basque population, who saw it as an act of unwarranted aggression. It transformed them from mere bystanders or a conquered people into active and vengeful enemies, ready to strike back. The Frankish army, now laden with plunder, spoils of war, and hostages, began its ascent into the treacherous mountain passes of the Pyrenees, unaware of the danger that awaited them. The seeds of disaster were now irrevocably sown, planted by a combination of factors: ambition that overreached, miscalculation of the political landscape, and a single fateful act of destruction that ignited the flames of resentment. The stage was now set, the players in place, for a deadly and devastating ambush in the heart of the Pyrenees. The Roncevaux Pass, a place etched in history and legend. It's a narrow, steep passage winding through the Pyrenees mountains and perfect for an ambush. The towering cliffs and rugged terrain offered ideal cover for any force lying in wait, a deadly choke point. On August 15, 778, a fateful day in the annals of military history, Charlemagne's rearguard, a contingent of his army led by the legendary Roland, cautiously entered the pass, unaware of the events that were about to unfold. They were completely unaware of the danger lurking above, hidden amongst the rocks and shadows. The attackers weren't Saracens, as later legends would suggest, but Basques, fierce local mountain warriors, deeply connected to their land and fiercely independent. They were furious over Charlemagne's recent destruction of Pamplona, a city sacred to them. Skillfully using the terrain to their advantage, they struck with a deadly barrage of rocks and javelins, catching the Frankish army completely off guard. The initial assault shattered the Frankish column, throwing them into disarray. The Franks, weighed down by their heavy armor and cumbersome baggage, found themselves at a severe disadvantage. They were trapped in the narrow pass and quickly overwhelmed by the relentless attack. Chaos reigned supreme, panic spread like wildfire through the ranks. In the end, the rearguard was utterly annihilated, leaving no survivors. After the slaughter, the Basques swiftly plundered the baggage train, seizing weapons, supplies, and valuables. Then, melting back into their familiar territory, they vanished into the mountains, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. The Basques were gone before Charlemagne could even organize a response or mount a counterattack. When the king finally returned to the scene of the ambush, he found only the gruesome remains of his once proud men, scattered amongst the rocks and debris. All that remained was the destroyed camp and the wreckage of his failed campaign. The most powerful ruler in Europe, the man who controlled vast swaths of land, was left helpless, humiliated, and burning for revenge. The real battle at Roncevaux Pass was swift and brutal, a far cry from the romanticized tales that would later emerge. It was a one-sided affair, a devastating defeat for the Franks, and an overwhelming victory for the Basques. The legend of Roland and the heroic stand against the Saracens would come much later, transforming a historical event into an epic poem. Who was the real Roland? History gives us only a glimpse. He's named in Einhard's Life of Charlemagne as Prefect of the Breton March, a high-ranking border commander. Roland was trusted, experienced, and chosen to lead the dangerous rearguard. His job: protect the retreating army from attack, a task requiring skill and courage. His death was a tragic loss, but not unique. Several top nobles died that day. There's no record of his personality or deeds beyond this. Roland was a capable officer, not a mythic hero. His fate was sealed by circumstance, not destiny. The legend would transform him, but the real man remains a shadow in history. For centuries, Roncevaux was a minor, painful memory. But by the 11th century, as the Crusades loomed, the story was reborn as the Song of Roland. The Basques vanished from the tale, replaced by a vast Saracen army. The messy politics became a holy war, good versus evil. Charlemagne became a saintly emperor, Roland the perfect Christian knight. The poem invented Roland's fatal pride and his heroic last stand, turning defeat into martyrdom. The Song of Roland inspired knights, justified crusades, and shaped the ideals of chivalry. The real ambush was forgotten. The legend served the needs of a new age. History became myth, and myth became a rallying cry. The truth was buried beneath epic poetry. The gap between history and legend is striking. Early accounts mention only a Basque ambush and the loss of key men, no Saracens, no heroics. For Charlemagne it was a humiliating setback and a personal tragedy. Yet, as the Song of Roland spread, the story became a cultural touchstone. Roland's fictional last stand defined the heroic knight for generations. The myth mattered more than the man, inspiring warriors and justifying wars. The real Roncevaux was a disaster. The legend, a source of meaning and identity. History gave us facts. Legend gave us heroes. Roland's journey from footnote to epic shows how we reshape the past. From a bloody ambush grew a legend that echoes through the ages.